Okay, so imagine your own military wants to kill you to start a war. Sounds insane, right? Well, in 1962, that's exactly what America's top generals proposed doing. I'm not kidding. I wish I was kidding. This actually happened. And honestly, when you hear the full story, you're going to be as disturbed as I was when I first learned about this. So picture this. It's 1997, and there's this researcher sitting in the National Security Archive in Washington. You know, one of those places with fluorescent lights and the smell of old paper everywhere. And they're doing what researchers do, going through boxes of declassified documents. Most of it's boring stuff. Memos about budget meetings, reports on Soviet grain production, the kind of paperwork that makes your eyes glaze over. But then they find this folder marked top secret. And look, I've read a lot of declassified documents for this channel. Most of them are heavily redacted. You know, black bars everywhere. But this one was different, because what they found inside wasn't just some Cold War secret. It was a plan that was so messed up, so morally bankrupt, that I honestly had to read it 3 times before I believed it was real. This was Operation Northwoods. And guys, when the public finally learned about this thing decades later, it changed everything people thought they knew about their own government. But here's the thing. To understand how something this crazy could even be proposed, we need to go back to when America was absolutely obsessed with one thing. Okay, so it's the early 1960s. And if you lived through this era, you know, everyone was terrified of nuclear war. I mean, genuinely terrified. Kids were doing duck and cover drills in schools. Families were building bomb shelters in their backyards. The whole world felt like it could end any second. And then Cuba happens. So you've got this island that's literally 90 miles from Florida. I looked it up. That's closer than driving from New York to Philadelphia. And in 1959, Fidel Castro takes over and decides he's buddies with the Soviet Union now. For Washington, this wasn't just embarrassing. This was like having your neighbor put up a Soviet flag in their front yard. So what do? They come up with this brilliant plan called the Bay of Pigs invasion. The idea was simple. Train some Cuban exiles. Give them weapons. They go back and overthrow Castro. Easy, right? Wrong. So wrong. The whole thing collapsed in 3 days. 3 days! Castro wasn't weakened. He was stronger than ever. Kennedy looked like an amateur. And the Pentagon? The Pentagon was absolutely furious. But here's their problem. The American people weren't exactly chomping at the bit to invade Cuba. There was no Pearl Harbor moment, you know? No big attack that made everyone angry and united. And without that, how do you sell a war to a democracy? Well, the Joint Chiefs of Staff had an idea. A really, really dark idea. And what they came up with was so shocking that when President Kennedy saw it, he basically said, "Are you people completely insane?" But I'm getting ahead of myself. Now let me break down exactly what Operation Northwoods proposed. And guys, when I tell you the details, you're not going to believe this was real. But it was. Every terrifying word of it. By 1962, the Pentagon was desperate to find a way to justify invading Cuba. The Bay of Pigs had been a disaster. Castro was stronger than ever, and the American public wasn't exactly demanding war. But the Joint Chiefs of Staff had a solution. And when I tell you what they came up with, I mean, the first time I read this, I thought it had to be fake. It wasn't. So in March 1962, the Joint Chiefs put together this document called Operation Northwoods. And guys, when I tell you what's in this thing, I mean, the first time I read it, I thought it had to be fake. But it's not. It's sitting right there in the National Archives. You can go look at it yourself. So what did they propose? Well, let me just read you some direct quotes from the actual document. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. Casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. A helpful wave of national indignation. They're talking about killing American sailors like it's a marketing campaign. But that's just the beginning. Oh, it gets so much worse. They wanted to stage fake hijackings. And not just fake hijackings, elaborate fake hijackings. Listen to this. An aircraft, an Eglin AFB, would be painted and numbered as an exact duplicate for a civil registered aircraft. The duplicate would be substituted for the actual civil aircraft. So basically, they take a military plane, paint it to look like a civilian airliner, swap it with the real plane mid-flight, and then crash the fake one and blame Cuba. The real passengers would just disappear, get new identities. And meanwhile, the whole world would see this Cuban attack on American civilians, and if that wasn't enough, they also wanted to bomb American cities, stage terrorist attacks in Miami and Washington, D.C., make it look like Cuban sabotage. Oh, and here's my personal favorite piece of psychotic planning. They suggested sinking boats full of Cuban refugees and then blaming Castro for killing people who were trying to escape his regime. Think about the psychology of that for a second. Use the deaths of people fleeing communism to justify fighting communism. It's almost artistic in how twisted it is. And all of this, every fake attack, every staged death, every manufactured piece of evidence, it was all designed to create one thing: public outrage. Because that's what they needed. They needed Americans to be so angry, so scared, so convinced that Cuba was a threat that they'd support any military action, even a full invasion. This wasn't some napkin sketch by a few crazy colonels. This was a formal military proposal with official letterhead operational timelines and the signature of General Lyman Lemnitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So when people hear about Operation Northwoods for the first time, they usually focus on the shocking tactics, the fake planes, the staged bombings, all that stuff. But I think that misses the really scary part of the story, because what Operation Northwoods really was, it was a plan to manipulate the American people using their own emotions against them. Think about it. These weren't stupid people. The Joint Chiefs knew exactly how human psychology works. They understood that in a democracy, the fastest way to get public support isn't through rational arguments. It's through fear and anger. So they designed every aspect of this plan to hit maximum emotional impact. Dead civilians create more outrage than destroyed military targets. Hijacked passenger planes generate more fear than bombed naval bases. Murdered refugees create more sympathy than killed soldiers. They were basically planning to turn every American into an unwitting participant in their own deception. And here's the really disturbing part. If Kennedy had said yes, it probably would have worked perfectly. Can you imagine the headlines? Castro attacks America. Round-the-clock news coverage of crying families and burning wreckage. Politicians on TV demanding immediate military action. Millions of Americans would have supported the invasion of Cuba, never knowing that their own government had manipulated them into it. And the truth would have stayed buried forever. History books would record it as a justified war. Kids would learn in school that America was attacked first and had to defend itself. That's what makes Operation Northwoods so much more than just a historical curiosity. It's proof that the most dangerous plans don't come from crazy people on the margins. They come from respected professionals at the very center of power. People who genuinely believed they were patriots. People who went home to their families every night and saw themselves as the good guys. But here's the thing. Operation Northwoods never happened. So let me tell you exactly why. Because the reason it got stopped might be the most important part of this entire story. So, if you've been following this story, you know that by March 1962, America's top military officials had drafted a plan to stage fake terrorist attacks, hijack planes, and murder American civilians, all to trick the public into supporting a war with Cuba. But Operation Northwoods never happened. And the reason why might be the most important part of this entire story. So, Operation Northwoods gets finished in March 1962. The Joint Chiefs approve it unanimously. It gets stamped top secret and sent up the chain of command. Eventually, it lands on the desk of President John F. Kennedy. Now, here's what you need to understand about Kennedy. This wasn't some peacenik hippie who was afraid of military action. This guy had authorized the Bay of Pigs invasion. He'd been in the Navy. He understood that sometimes you have to play hardball in international politics. So when General Lemnitzer walked into the White House with Operation Northwoods, he probably thought he had a pretty good chance of getting approval. I mean, from the Pentagon's perspective, this made perfect sense. The plan was detailed, comprehensive, and would definitely work to get public support for invading Cuba. But Kennedy read through it, and his reaction was basically, Are you people completely insane? He rejected the whole thing immediately, not just parts of it, the entire plan. And apparently, he was so disturbed by what his own military had proposed that it fundamentally changed how he viewed the Pentagon. Within a few months, Lemnitzer was out as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Kennedy basically fired him and sent him off to run NATO in Europe. Operation Northwoods filed away on the classified wall and sat for over 30 years. Here's what really gets me about this whole story. Kennedy didn't reject the plan. He rejected it because it was wrong, which means the Pentagon Operation Northwoods proves that voice in your head isn't paranoid. It's historically informed, because if American military leaders were once willing to plan fake terrorist attacks to start a war with Cuba, what makes you think similar conversations aren't happening about other countries, other conflicts, other necessary military actions? Every time a new batch of documents gets declassified, we learn about more stuff that sounds impossible, but turned out to be real. So the question isn't whether our government is capable of this kind of deception. Operation Northwoods answered that question forever. The question is, what else don't we know yet? Look, I'm not trying to turn you into some paranoid conspiracy theorist who doesn't trust anything, but Operation Northwoods teaches us something really important. Democracy only works when citizens stay awake. Genker, when we ask hard questions, when we demand transparency, when we remember that the people in power are just people, and people are capable of making terrible decisions when they think the ends justify the means. Operation Northwoods was stopped because one person, President Kennedy, had the courage to say no when everyone else was saying yes. But we can't always count on having leaders like that, which means it's up to us to stay informed, stay skeptical, and keep asking uncomfortable questions. The full Operation Northwoods documents are online. You can read every page yourself. It's all there. Every disturbing detail, every bureaucratic euphemism for murder, every signature from America's highest military officials. And when you do read them, you'll understand why this story matters so much. Because somewhere in a classified file cabinet right now, there might be another Operation Northwoods, another plan for another crisis with another enemy, just waiting for the right moment and the wrong president. The question Operation Northwoods leaves us with isn't whether our government is good or evil. It's simpler and scarier than that. How much do you really know about what they're doing in your name? And what are you going to do about it? If this series shocked you as much as it shocked me when I first learned about it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more deep dives into the declassified documents they don't teach you about in history class, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, Operation Northwoods is just the tip of the iceberg.